Hey everyone, I'm excited to be back with you this week as we continue on in week 7 of our leadership series. Over the last many weeks, we have made our way through the 4 domains of leading like Jesus, as you remember, the heart, head, hands, and habits of a leader. Today, we're going to continue where we left off by discussing what to do when conflicts and challenges arise. This happens all the time. We have to know how to respond. Through conflicts and challenges, we have this great opportunity to step back and reevaluate the situation we're in, the people we have the opportunity to serve, and then gauge whether or not we need to apologize and make a change. It's not only for our development, but it's for theirs as well. Today is about having some practical tools to be able to serve those who we follow and or influence. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis, the famous Christian author. He said, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." I want to have a dialogue about these 3 things together in our group today that are at the center of this quote by Lewis. And first, I want to go over briefly this idea of servant leadership as communicated throughout the book that we're in and the Lead Like Jesus philosophy. And next, I want to introduce you to what happens when our ego gets in the way, because it does, of learning. And finally, we'll discuss the power of Blanchard's 2-part apology, because we have to understand how to be able to do that practically. So if you don't already have something to write with and a piece of paper, you may want to press pause and get a hold of them, because I want to make sure that you guys capture this. Let's go ahead and get started by reading Philippians 2, 5 through 7. It says this: "In our relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness." It's amazing. When difficult situations present themselves and other people are involved, these situations can cause damage quickly. If we're leading like Jesus, we need to be okay with asking ourselves the question, am I being a self-serving leader or am I being a servant leader? It's good to always have that in front of us to evaluate us. It's important that we have people in our lives who we can have ask that question. It's also important to start by asking ourselves that question first before casting any blame or accepting assumptions. It just causes so much damage. Blanchard says that the most persistent barrier to leading like Jesus is a heart motivated by self-interest. Now, our heart, head, hands, and habits are continually going through a process. We've been discussing that through this whole time, and need to be transformed through this continual exposure and surrender to Jesus. Author Scott Peck says servant leadership is more than a concept, it's a fact. Any great leadership by which also can mean an ethical leader of any group will see herself or himself as a servant of that group and will act accordingly. Since so much of servant leadership is based on coaching those who follow our influence and how we respond to those who are mentoring us, it's a huge part of what we walk through. So let's take a moment to example some of the potential pitfalls when we shift towards being self-serving and not tempted to lead like Jesus. So the first thing we're going to talk about is ego issues and the novice stage of that. And we're going to look at 2 sides: the learner and novice side of it, and then the teacher and leader side of it as well. So on the learner and novice side of the ego issues, and remember that's the beginner, we see a lot of fear, because when we're edging God out, there's fear and pride that come into play. Fear of failure, fear of inadequacy, fear of looking foolish, false pride due to prior performance, kind of hanging your hat in what you did before, and lack of trust in the leader or the method of training, right? Because if you're at the beginning, you need to be well trained, so you actually understand, so you have that great baseline. So now on the other side of this is the teacher. They can have their own ego issues. Impatience in teaching fundamentals. Maybe they're so advanced they don't have an appreciation for that foundation, so it's always important being able to, as I like to say, put the cookies on the bottom shelf so that people can get to where you're at. Frustration with slow progress. Maybe this person isn't excelling, the learner isn't excelling as quickly as you like. Temptation for premature delegation. It's always a habit, especially when we see potential in a beginner, to move them up the way of the carpenter too quickly, which is what we're talking about. Remember, novice, apprentice, journeyman, and master. And then making quick judgments of potential. This is a big one. We can put people in the wrong place at the wrong time, and nothing can discourage a learner, a novice, more quickly. And then the fear of failure. We find that on both sides as we go throughout this. Let's look at the next stage, which is the apprentice stage, as we move along the way of the carpenter, which we have reviewed. And we see the apprentice, ego issues that they encounter is discouragement, a lack of progress, right? Maybe they want to get there quicker. They feel like they have it. Impatience with learning process, loss of faith in the learning process, fear of failure or inadequacy maybe, and loss of faith in the leader. Also diminished enthusiasm for a task. Maybe they've kind of got it, but they want to move forward. So it's tempering them and giving them the patience that they need to do it well. And then the teacher or leader has their own issues. Frustration maybe with a lack of enthusiasm, unrealistic expectations of people, fear of opinion of others, criticism, loss of position, or failure. So these are things that we have to be aware of. The way of the carpenter has different things that we need to address in it in regards to being teachable on the negative and the positive side. So the next one we see is the journeyman stage. On the journeyman stage, we find different ego issues that are starting to develop a lot more. The fear of failure when moving into new situations, burnout, or loss of enthusiasm. Now remember, at this point, the journeyman is on their own. They're on their own, and they're practicing it now. They have enough capacity to be able to go out and do it. Fear of success and expanded use of skills, being obsolete, competition, exploitation. These are all things that you maybe have experienced. The next one is on the teacher side. We can't forget about that side of the journeyman stage. The lack of sensitivity to lost enthusiasm. How do we help our people and keep it fresh and let them remember the why of what they're doing? The fear of intimacy required to deal with the individual issues. So it's important to have a relationship with those people so you can see what they need and you can serve them in that way as a teacher in this stage. Overuse of competence. So maybe this person is so competent that they are overused because of that. We have to be careful with our people and the potential of burnout, which we did talk about on the other side. And then the fear of the learner surpassing the teacher. That's really an ego piece that gets in the way. If anything, we want to help our learners to do that. We want to help journeymen to surpass us. It's a great way to leave a legacy. And then fear of confronting slips in performance. Now let's look at the next one in the last stage, which is the master stage. And this is the very end where really you have two masters, one a learner and one is a teacher. On the learner side, some of the ego issues are complacency with current personal knowledge and skills. So this person might not be as challenged. Maybe they're becoming a little bit arrogant. I've got this covered. I don't need your help. Unwillingness to take criticism or direction. Man, it's so important to be teachable. We all have different parts of the way of the carpenter. We're a novice at other things and we're masters in others. So it's always important to be teachable. And misuse of skills for self-serving purposes. Man, that is a way to edge God out really quickly. And then on the teacher side is fear of personal being obsolete when a learner can do the same thing. Maybe a teacher feels like, oh man, this person, I'm now not as valuable. Unwillingness to share information or recognition because maybe they're threatened by that person, and fear of loss of control. So these are all real things where our pride and fear can get in the way. All right, guys, now that we're done with the ego issues, let's continue forward because there's always going to be times when challenges and conflicts arise. And it's important that we don't get too romantic about leadership. And what I mean by that is it's hard work. And it starts by doing the unseen, unappreciated, and unsung challenges of developing yourself. And when conflict comes, it's important to be ready. It's important to be ready. Blanchard recommends what he calls a two-part apology, and he prefaces this advice by saying, the longer you wait to apologize for wrongdoing, the quicker a weakness is perceived as a wickedness. I love that quote. It's true. A successful delivery of the two-part apology is immediate, it's specific, and it shares how you feel. So in order to give a genuine Lead Like Jesus two-part apology, a person must have a solid self-esteem, rather than relying on performance or the opinion of others, which comes from the belief in God's unconditional love. And this is something we talked about in the habits section before. Now, part one is that the good apology starts with surrender, which means that I need to focus on myself. Now, that means my actions and my ego, and that I did something wrong, rather than pointing the finger. Now the next step, step two, which states that a good apology ends with integrity. I really like this because it causes me to realign myself with the situation and reach out to the other person and commit not to repeat the action and live out proof. We have to live out what we're talking about. So here's a question I want you to discuss. Name one or two of the ego issues you're experiencing personally as a teacher or in whichever stage you're in. What can you do to shift out of this issue and change your outlook? And is there someone you need to reconcile with in order to move forward? So take a moment and discuss this in your group. So you guys, this week I'm here with Pastor DJ, our Tierra Santa campus pastor, and Lisa Walks, who actually speaks at our campuses and leads our sermon team. So it's great to have you guys here. And we're going to talk this week about servant leadership and how our egos tend to get in the way. Now, I have a couple questions for you guys, and want us to discuss them today. So what are some of the challenges that you guys face when your ego gets in the way of leading like Jesus, and how do you get that back on track? So DJ, what are your thoughts? Like when you get derailed and kind of, emotionally hijacked, how do you get back on track?
Well, with ego edging God out, what I've realized for me is it's not just edging God out. What I tend to do is edge other people out too. And so a big part of me, and I know this is a core value that we talk about often at New Break and everything like that, but it's having someone, and not just someone, but several people in my life that could call out when I'm being prideful, when I'm being arrogant, when I'm being, just a jerk, for lack of better words. And so when they do that, which is something that I give them permission to do, that's when it opens up the door for me to see the wrong that I'm doing and then be able to improve on those areas. I personally have to have that. So, or else I become dangerous.
Mm-hmm. And it's worked really well. Like DJ has given me permission to be able to call out some things sometimes, and to be able to say, "Hey, I don't think you're really intending it to come across this way," but in that situation,
like on a sermonic level, that's super fun to have her be able to do that too. And so, and a personal level, because we get to be friends and things like that too. So.
Lisa, how do you find yourself applying that, in a family context? Because we all have families here, and that's definitely a piece of this. Is lead like Jesus is not only to be applied in what you do, but it's really applying it to who you are. So how do you find yourself, getting back on track? Because oftentimes that's the big battle, is making sure that we're focused and that we're on track. So how do you do that? How do you go about that?
Sure. In a family situation, it is. I find I can very quickly go into those behaviors where I'm being prideful, or where I'm allowing fear to drive. And that's what the edging God out piece is. And so what I've had to do is realize that certain behaviors actually are pride, or they actually are fear. So if I'm having a discussion with Robert and it's getting animated and I'm not quite getting my way, or he's thinking something different, I can quickly go to a place of thinking, I'm being defensive. And I've realized in those moments that defensiveness is really just pride. And what would serve me better is just listening to what he's trying to say, trying to get it from his perspective a little bit more, because it's not just about me, and it's not just about what I'm experiencing in those moments, but it can very much go down that road unless I jump in quickly and check my own reaction.
Sure. You can be right, but be completely wrong, in the way that you do it. So, DJ, talk to me a little bit. I mean, we all manage teams here, and there's some best practices that we can really take from Lead Like Jesus in regards to servant leadership and how we manage our teams. So what are some things that you've found in managing teams that have really helped you from a Lead Like Jesus point of view?
I think one of my favorite things in reading through the book and going through some of the seminars is realizing that the team that I get to manage, the team that I get to help, all of them are experts in their own particular field. All of them are really, for lack of better words, geniuses where they're at. And many of them have way more knowledge specifically in that field than I do. So it's, I don't know, maybe naive of me or arrogant or prideful for me to come into a situation and go, this is how you should run it. Instead, servant leadership for me means I come alongside and I get to offer my perspective. I get to say, hey, being a dad of 2 girls, this is what I see when it comes to children's ministry, or this is what I see with youth ministry, or this is what I see in worship, or whatever department I get to help with. But all of them are really, really good at what they do. That's why they're part of the team. And so that's kind of one of the things I found to be the most beneficial is learning how not to heavy-handed manage the team, but to try to work with the team. But that's a process and something that takes time to learn.
It's always a process, right? Yeah. It definitely is. And now, Lisa, you've worked in the secular realm, in legal practice as a lawyer, and you've done a variety of things. How have you applied this, back and forth from a secular marketplace to at home to here in ministry? Because you've kind of been in those different things. How have you worked with teams, and how have you found that Lead Like Jesus point of view has been really helpful?
Well, that's what I love about it is that I think it easily translates into each of those different environments. It's not like when I'm at home with my family, I do it a certain way,
Sure.
but when I'm with colleagues, it's a different way. It's actually the same principles throughout. And one of the things that I found that has really been helpful is in dealing with conflict. I can sometimes quickly want to get to the resolution, but there's great value in going through the process and really allowing people, equipping them to be able to navigate through that they need to learn how to communicate what's going on and facilitating that process a little bit more. It's easy, especially at home with kids when they're little, to just try to quickly make everything okay, get to the end of it, but teaching them how to resolve conflict, because I'm raising up men, not boys. These are going to be fathers and husbands, and so those same skills apply.
So are you saying that you do that through, you're the same and consistent through your family, through your, I don't know, personal or friends side of things and your business side of things? Like, you remain consistent through that? Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say? Like, your leadership style stays similar, or do you tend to change as the season or the team changes?
I think my intent is to try to take those same skills in each of the different environments, but obviously we're all works in progress,
Right.
trying to figure out how to do it. It's easier in some dynamics than
Sure.
it is in others. So.
Well, and that's kind of part of the point of when we talked in week 5 about the way of the carpenter and how we're all in a process and how we all develop. So we're going to be coming back to a couple more questions, you guys. And real quickly, what I want you to do is enjoy this question together. Now, during the Last Supper and during Jesus' last moments with his disciples, he wanted to make a point about the importance of servant leadership. So what I'd like for you guys to do is read Luke 22 through 27, read the text and discuss what Jesus is implying about leadership. So go ahead and take a moment as a group and discuss that. You guys can see, as you discussed, Luke 22, Jesus is not only talking about leadership there and its importance in trying to spur people on to understand what it means to really lead like him, but he does that all throughout the New Testament. Now, what I want to do is bring it back and talk to Lisa and Pastor DJ a little bit about conflict, because often it can be kind of a bad word, that idea of, having an argument, but it's really not. So what are some of the things from a Lead Like Jesus perspective that you guys have found to be valuable in regards to conflict?
We don't deal with conflict. We work at a church,
Exactly.
we never have any
That we're
conflict.
only
I have a perfect marriage all the time. So,
But
we're
I
good to
think
go.
though that's part of the issue though, is that we have these expectations that we're in certain environments that there shouldn't be conflict. That in my marriage, what does it mean if we have conflict? What does it mean if we're arguing in a church
And someone once told me right when I first got married, and I love this, that when it comes to marriage, if you could argue respectfully, that's actually a healthy thing. Whenever I hear couples say that they're not arguing or they haven't fought about anything, it always kind of throws a red flag up for me. Like, are you really communicating then? Because there's no way that you get along all the time. It just doesn't happen.
And I think that's part of it, then realizing you're going to have differences of opinion, and to learn how to navigate that, to learn that they're going to have a perspective, whether that be your spouse, whether it be your boss, whether it be another team member, whoever it is, they're going to have a perspective, and so are you. So how do you communicate and be okay with the fact that you may not agree about some things, but there's a way to navigate that. And ultimately, even, you may have to agree to disagree, but that you can do it in a way that you can at least hear the other person's perspective. And I think that's the really important piece from a Lead Like Jesus model, is learning how to be able to hear and validate the other person's perspective, whether you agree with it or not.
Right.
Well, and I think that's super important to our development, because having conflicts in a healthy way leads to crucial conversations for our development. And that's something that we have to remember. It's not like a bad word or anything like that where, oh my gosh, we're having an argument, that must mean that we're dysfunctional. Well, no, when we do it well, it's actually leading to what's next. Because a lot of times the things that are of value, we need different perspectives. So we're not one-sided. And whether it's a relationship with your wife or with your kids, or a relationship at work, or maybe some friendships. I mean, we're all friends here at this table, and we've all had those crucial conversations at one point or another. So that kind of segues me into the next question. If someone here is maybe in the life group here is, kind of starting off and they're understanding Lead Like Jesus, and they're going, how do I apply this to my family? Because we're all parents here and we're all married. So we have that, perspective of trying to integrate this within our family life. So how do you guys do it? What are some ways that you found success, and how would you encourage them to start off? What's the first step?
Very easy, serve. The very first thing, I think, is just so easy. Coming at the relationship, whether
That's
it be
way
with
too
your
simple.
spouse.
You can't use that.
I know. But that idea of, how can I serve my spouse today? How can I serve my kids today? What can I do to make their life easier? And even just jumping out of me and my experience to say, they have an experience as well, and what can I do? And the idea of just being able to serve them, thinking through those lenses. I mean, how many of us would, probably fall off of our seat if our 5-year-old came up and said, Mom, Dad, how can I serve you today?
No, it was cool. Yesterday, that happened. One of the services, a mom came up to me, and the kid asked if she could go and help serve in a ministry, and she came up to me like befuddled. That was a great word. Befuddled that the kid would want to serve, and there was this cool sense of pride that came with her as she's telling me this story, because it is serving. That's to serve someone else, really, and for a kid to get it.
Absolutely. And I think it's challenging, because as parents, you're thinking, no, the children, you need to do what I'm telling you to do, and you need to, perform the role that you need to do. But we're raising up adults. And they're going to be functioning environments where serving and learning how to do that is so crucial.
Well, and we're it's really that next generation that's coming up, and it's that whole idea of legacy and how we are being called to really raise up the next generation of leaders. That changes our perspective quite a bit. And so what I like for you guys to do is shift your attention, and hopefully those are some suggestions that have helped. but I want you to look at how you handle situations when you're confronted with a self-focused leader. And how do you respond when your leadership is questioned? Because that happens, with your motives and integrity, and when it's attacked. How do you guard against being an ego-charged leader? Those are some big questions that we have to unpack in order to understand how to lead like Jesus. So in your group, go ahead and take a moment and discuss those. As we close our group today, I would like your facilitator to lead you in silence for a few minutes. Now, during that time, as you pray individually, I really want to challenge you to pray about someone who you have the opportunity to coach. And maybe on the other side of this is maybe someone who God is calling you to apologize to. Ask God to help you understand how to lead like Jesus and be a servant leader for our families, communities, and friends. And before I leave today, I want to encourage you to do an outreach in your group wherever you are at. Now, this can be a lot of different things, from handing out socks and blankets to those who are homeless, to helping someone move, or even providing someone who is sick with a meal. Talk about what you could do as a group and have a great week as you continue to learn how to lead like Jesus.